Can you spot the major differences between this image and this image? Well, apart from the fact they are two completely different games, my previous project and my latest project, there is one major difference, and that is lighting. Lighting in games is extremely important and something that you really need to consider when you're making your project. It conveys atmosphere, it conveys tone, and can even be used to hide some really dodgy things in the background. My main problem is that I was afraid of the dark. Not in that way. If you need help with being afraid of the dark, there's probably videos and professionals that can help you out with that one. But what I mean is I was afraid to make my scenes dark. I always lit things way too well, and there's good reasons behind that. There's a very fine balance between your game being dark and your game being too dark. Now, I'm no professional. I haven't been professionally, classically trained in the art of illumination. I'm just telling you about things that I've learned while I'm now on my third project. It's really crazy to think that I've now worked on 2 released games and I'm working on my third, which is a lot bigger than my first 2 by far. If you're a fan of 90s survival horror, whether you grew up then or you're going back and playing the classics, go wishlist Decaying Salvage. The new trailer came out a couple of weeks ago and it is fantastic. The music is so good. The composer I've got on board is doing a hell of a job. So please go wishlist that on Steam, I would really appreciate it. When developing We Are Not Alone, I had immense issues with the lighting. And this was because I put this weird constraint on myself in that I wanted everyone possible to be able to play it. And lighting was one of the biggest things that I was having performance issues with. So I went the route of using baked lighting, which if you're unaware, it's a process where the lighting pre-calculates, saves itself to images which get loaded at runtime. That's the very most simple, basic explanation I can give. Feel free to look it up if you're interested. My problems, though, didn't come from the whole light baking situation. I know how that works, that's completely fine. My own concerns were personal, in that I was worried about making the game too dark, and in the end, probably made it a bit too bright, especially for a horror game. If you make your game too dark, people complain that it's too dark and you can't see anything. Make it too bright, and you have risk stripping out that atmosphere that you're trying to convey. And hey, if I make it too dark, then maybe I'm just going to get rid of a lot of the small details that I've put in there that I want people to see. As you can see in this scene view here, We Are Not Alone had a ton of light sources to keep everything even, which gives it this unnatural feeling, which is good, where everything is, well, just super well lit. By contrast, Decaying Salvage, my latest game, uses minimal light sources, and the scene is lit by objects that would naturally light an environment. So I was having issues with my game being too bright, and I didn't want to go too dark. What is too dark? Well, too dark is if, imagine you make a game and it's just completely pitch black. You've only got the world's crappiest flashlight in order to illuminate areas. It's been done a lot. It's very cheap when it comes to jump scares, and really doesn't create that great of an atmosphere unless it's really well done. When I say the crappiest flashlight in the world, have you seen what happens to light when you turn on a flashlight? It spreads light around, light bounces. And light is very important. You can see that I've actually got some cool lighting going on here. I've got this front-facing light that illuminates me, I've got my lights at the back, and I've also got a curtain here, which is giving me some extra light. So lighting is very important to consider where it's coming from. Things aren't always naturally pitch black. Very rarely will it be. The sun casts light. Even at night, the sunlight bounces off the moon, unless it's that tiny little sliver of a moon, then it's almost completely pitch black. Do you get my point? Pure pitch black is too dark. Don't do it. Unless, you know, you've got a really cool thing going on, in which case, show me, please, because I'd be very interested in seeing that. So what can you do to make sure that your game is lit nicely? As I just said about the sunlight and the moon, think about how things are lit naturally. For me and my game, it is coming from signs, it's coming from actual light fixtures in the roof, and it's just coming from things such as flame and environmental effects. That is where the light comes from. In We Are Not Alone, I was making the light come from everywhere, all at once, and it was just very unnatural. Think about in your own areas how a ceiling light brings the entire room, a single bulb, brings an entire room to a decent level of light. Think about how a computer screen would be pushing light out into the room and onto people and onto faces. There's so many light sources that once you actually start thinking about it, become much more logical to put in. Now, you don't want to put every single one of them in perfectly like that, where it's casting a shadow, where it's illuminating something, because that is way too expensive in terms of a game engine. So you do have to be careful, but it's a good place to start, and it's where I started. Make sure that you keep your lighting consistent. Now, I don't just mean in terms of brightness and color temperature, I mean the colors themselves. Now, I've got a document that I use, and it lists all the colors that I use for each individual type of light. So computer screens, signs, anything that's holographic has one specific color that I will use, which keeps consistency. Same with ceiling lights, same with lights from other signs. There's like, I think 4 different light colors that I use for an entire scene. Now, this will change with other scenes that I'm creating because I need to create different kinds of glows, but I will stick with the same kind of 4 light color palette. One other thing you really need to keep in mind is that no matter what you do, some people will find your game is too dark, or some people will find your game is way too bright. So make sure you put a gamma option in your settings. They're a bit fiddly depending what you're using, but it's worth it. So I'm giving all this advice. I'm not a master of illumination, but how did I get here? Well, that's pretty interesting. I was thinking when moving into this project and when I did the first prototypes, we'll get to that in a second, that the lighting just didn't feel right, and I couldn't figure out why exactly. So I went back to what has inspired Decaying Salvage. I went back to the Resident Evils. I went back to Dead Space, both the original and remake. Dead Space 2 is the reason I really started to pursue game development, just so you know. And I found something that was right in front of me the whole time. These games can be dark, but they're well lit at the same time. So things such as when you're in Resident Evil 2, the remake, and you go under the shutter into that first corridor, it is dark. You've only got your flashlight, which, hey, isn't the world's best flashlight, but it does the job. And you can look down the end, and it is just very obscured, very dark. And when the scares happen, though, they are not cheap, because when you get to those areas, they are actually fairly lit. It's just they use that darkness as of a what could be in there, but they never have anything just popping straight out of the darkness at you, because that would be cheap shit horror. And another inspiration, if you've played the Dead Space remake, when you first get off your ship and there's the big bright lights coming in at you and you're seeing just that entrance walkway, the first time you get off your ship in Decaying Salvage, heavily inspired by that, which also helped me figure out the whole volumetric lighting system, which I use sparingly because, again, that is something that is very expensive in game engines. The way I'm handling it is good, performance is good, even on the Steam Deck. I'm hitting like a solid 40 FPS on the Steam Deck before I do any optimization, so go me. All in all, what I'm trying to say is that lighting is very important. You need to make sure you're looking at your natural light sources, how you're lighting this, and obviously if that doesn't go with the style of game you're looking to do, you can do some really interesting things with lights that are not natural. But for me, it's really helped to get a better, deeper horror feeling by going for these natural light sources. So yes, try to figure out your light sources, figure out how that's going to look in game. It can really help change things immensely. For instance, look at this old footage of the first Decaying Salvage prototype. This is before it was third-person fixed camera. It just didn't look that great, and also I was not having much fun making that. It's completely changed for the better, both for how I'm feeling about the project and what I want to be making. But the difference between this original and how it looks now, just by changing how lighting works. The original Decaying Salvage prototype used the same kind of lighting as We Are Not Alone, which we touched on earlier, which was a lot of bloody light sources in these rooms, because I felt like everything had to be the same level of brightness. This is just one of those things that I wish I'd known back when making We Are Not Alone. It would have made the game so much better in terms of just the visuals and the feeling and the atmosphere. I'm super proud of that game. It has sold well for the amount of marketing I did. Not much. And yeah, I just wish this is something I knew, which is why I made this video, because it might help you as well. If it has, please leave a comment down below, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. I feel horrible asking for that, but please, it does help. And until next time, I'm Druid, I'm developing Decaying Salvage, please go wishlist it on Steam, check out the new trailer that dropped, and I'll see you next time.
Galactic location unknown.